Hey, Joe Berkovitz here, and I'm here to talk about how to make navigational charts using the open source program QGIS. So this is a walkthrough of material on my website, qgis-nautical. That's a GitHub project hosted on GitHub, and we're looking at it here in this browser. So I'm going to assume that you already downloaded and installed the QGIS program. That's the very first step described in the website materials. So you should have a QGIS screen that looks something like this. It might have other bits and pieces in it, but that's what QGIS looks like when you're starting it up. No maps visible yet. So we need to get and open the template project. The template project is a QGIS project file that contains a bunch of settings and map layers and different things that we can use to make charts. And I've pre-assembled these in a single project for you so that they're all available from the get-go. So let's start by downloading this file and opening it in QGIS. I'm going to click the download link. Now I've got a copy of that file, and it's going to be sitting in some download folder. I strongly recommend that the first thing you do is make a folder somewhere else on your computer and move it there, because you're going to be saving other files along with it, and you don't want to be doing that in some place where you download stuff. So I've made us a nice little folder, QGIS demo, to do this work in. The next thing we're going to do is open that project template in the QGIS program. So let's go to QGIS, project menu, open, and let's open the template. So right away, we see a map. This is the main map view of QGIS. And what it is a place to browse and inspect your maps. It's not a place where you prepare the final version of your chart to be printed, but it's a place where you can see all the information that's going to be in the printed chart. So let's move it from side to side by dragging. We're going to pan the map, as we say. And as you can see, as I pan the map, we're seeing different areas show up. And what we're actually seeing is kind of stitched together pieces of different charts from NOAA. We're using a special, it's called a tiled map service that NOAA provides that basically stitches together a bunch of maps at an appropriate scale for whatever degree of magnification you're using when you look at it. So this is a layer in QGIS. Layers are, you could think of them as kind of carpets of visual information that are laid out in a specific map projection for the globe. We're using a so-called Mercator projection here. And every layer is visible in this layers panel on the left. Right now, there's only one layer, which is NOAA raster nav charts. And it's got a checkbox. The checkbox means you can see it. If I uncheck the box, you won't see anything. Let's check it again. We've got other layers too. We have Google Maps satellite. We have OpenStreetMap. So those are the three choices that you get in this project template for kind of base maps, or maps that kind of carpet the area and fill in everything. And as you can see, they're all perfectly aligned with each other. QGIS knows how to exactly stretch and fit a map so that it's in the same, maps of the same area are exactly matched to each other positionally. There are also layers in QGIS that contain other information that can be overlaid on top of this. So for instance, there's NOAA tide and current stations and waypoints that you might want to add yourself. So we've been panning the map, but let's also talk about zooming it, because that's very important. You zoom the map using the same gesture on your computer that you would use to, say, scroll a window. So Let's see if I can find something to scroll. Here I've got a list of stuff in a window. On your computer, you may use your trackpad. Often it's 2 fingers on the trackpad up and down to scroll a window. If you've got a mouse with a wheel, the wheel might do that. It varies from computer to computer, but if you do that same gesture in the QGIS window, you will scroll in. Scrolling down is the same as scrolling in. And as you scroll in, you will get more and more detail. As you scroll out, you will get less and less detail. That's because we're using a tiled map service rather than a specific single NOAA chart. But this tiled map service is awfully handy. We don't have to make any decisions. It's just showing us stuff that seems kind of useful, no matter what. Well, that's actually pretty great. It's great because we don't have to fuss with it. It'll give us a pretty decent map without our having to worry a whole lot about it. So let's make a map of Salem Sound, right near where I live. In order to make a map, we don't use this main window. This main window is kind of about browsing around, seeing what you want, picking what layers you want to show, and then making the map based on that. So this is like a browsing window. We want to make a layout. That's what QGIS uses to print something, to make something that you might actually use on a deck of a boat. So let's now go to the layout manager. And we have 4 choices that I've prepared for you of kind of pre-made layouts, 2 orientations and 2 scales. And we're going to pick landscape 1 to 50,000. And the next thing you'll want to do is, because these are layout templates, duplicate it, and give it a meaningful name, Salem Sound, we'll call it. And you'll now see we've got a new window. This window shows the layout. The layout appears to be of a place that's nothing to do with what we want. Why is that? It's because we made a copy of an existing layout in the project that I threw in there that happens to be pointed at a different area. The very first thing we have to do is sync this with our main map. So to do that, click the map to select it. You want to go to the Item Properties tab on the right. If you don't have one, the first time you can right-click your map and go to Item Properties. And over here in the Item Properties map, this very first icon with an orange arrow, it's going to be hard to see because it's little. If you click that icon, this map will automatically sync to the same area as our main map. So now what we did see on our main map is in our layout. We've also got some other nice things. We've got a grid, looks pretty decent, labeled with tick marks, latitude, longitude. We've got a title. Let's move the title somewhere unobtrusive and change it. We've also got a scale bar. That scale bar is exactly matched to the scale that we are using. Let's move that over here too. And we might want to fine tune this map a little bit. It's showing a little more than I want. So over here on the left is a special toolbar that lets you switch between selecting and moving things like we've been doing, and panning the map content and zooming the map content. This tool here is for that. When that is selected, clicking and moving in here, rather than dragging the map around, drags the content of the map around. And zooming it changes the content of that map too. It looks like it does zoom it. I have to go back and select the map again. Whoops, there we go. So I'm zooming in, notice my grid is getting bigger. It's a little frustrating that QGIS is not showing me the exact level of detail that I'll eventually get. That's a bug that's going to be fixed in a version soon to come, I gather. But this is about the area that I want to look at. I could verify that there is detail here if I want by just kind of zooming in on the whole layout, and we would see that detail eventually show up. If we wait long enough. There we go. The tiled map service automatically brings in tiles as they're needed for the level of detail, and that can be a little irritating, but we'll see how to deal with that in a minute. Let's export our map. And up at the top, here's an export as PDF icon. Or you can go to layout and just pick export as PDF. And let's export this in our QGIS demo folder, save. We get another dialog with a bunch of options that we can just ignore. And at this point, we've got to wait a little bit because QGIS is going to download all those detailed map tiles for us, bring them in, and it's going to take a minute. Should be ready about now. Okay, not now. Now, let's open up the PDF that we just saved, and we're going to see a nice, crisp, detailed Salem Sound map made to order. And if you blow it up, you will see indeed it is super sharp. It's as much sharper and higher quality than a map you might make by just cropping a PDF or screenshotting it. There's just a world of difference. So what do we like about our map? What do we not like about it? Well, it's coming from the tiled map service, as I mentioned. So NOAA just gave us kind of a stitched together bunch of maps. You can see it's higher resolution on the left than on the right. And there's this kind of weird area where the two maps are exactly seamed together. Maybe that's what you want, maybe it's not. I find that these super detailed maps are very hard to read actually for recreational use. And the somewhat coarser resolution that you see on the right is actually easier. So we can make some explicit choices in QGIS that will let us pick the exact maps that we want. So let's see how to do that. Let's go back to QGIS, back to the main window. And let's zoom out. Now, there's another layer here that we didn't turn on before called raster chart downloads. This layer allows us to download specific maps that we care about and make a choice of just which scale of NOAA chart we want to include. So let's turn on this layer. And we see a whole bunch of confusing rectangles with labels. They're for all these different scales. And for my purpose, which is sea kayaking, I find 1 to 40,000 is just a really good scale to use most of the time. So I've got several different possibilities here. If I zoom out a little bit, we can kind of see what they are. It looks like there's a 1 to 40,000 map that sort of a big diagonal map. Let's pick that one. So to download a map, you need to switch to the Identify tool on this top toolbar. You can see I'm highlighting it now. Identify features, it's like the eye symbol with the circle. And once I've clicked that, I can go over the map area that I care about in the downloads layer, right click, and I get a choice. You can see it says raster chart downloads, and that cascades to a couple of other menus. And I can pick which of the two maps under my mouse I care about. And for each of those, I have the option of previewing or downloading. Let's do preview first and just see what we'll be getting. This takes my browser straight to the NOAA site for this map, for this particular map. And yeah, I kind of like this level of detail. It seems about right. 1 to 40 would be better. 1 to 25 is pretty good. I like it. So let's go back to QGIS. And again, I'm going to right click this one map. In my right click menu, I'm going to now go to download and add chart layer. And this is going to download the actual file from NOAA for this specific chart, automatically clip it to remove the kind of writing around the edges and the grid and the copyright notice and whatnot. And we're going to be left with a brand new layer in our map. That layer is going to just contain this one chart, this one scale. Then we'll have total control over what we see in our final printed layout. It takes a minute to do all this clipping and processing, but when all is said and done, pretty soon, just now, come on, there we go. We've got our downloaded chart. So let's turn off the download info layer. And let's in fact turn off the tiled chart service. And now we're just looking at exactly one NOAA chart. And this chart's now downloaded to our computer. We're not grabbing it over the internet like we were with the other tiled thing. That depends on an internet connection. I should have mentioned that. This one is downloaded to your computer, so you could use it anytime. I think we like it. Let's go back to the layout that we had before. And we can click the refresh icon here to make sure we're looking at the same info that we were before. We are. So good. Now we've got one single uniform scale. And you'll notice that it's also previewing properly because it's not dynamically adjusting to the screen resolution or anything. We're going to get exactly this when we print it. Now let's do one more useful thing. Let's add some magnetic north grid lines. I've prepared a layer for folks to use. It's in the website. And we can download that layer. I'm just scrolling down to the section that talks about it. Let's download it using this link to a magnetic grid line layer that we've made. Here it is. We'll show it in the Finder. Let's, again, let's move that to the same folder as our project. And I'm going to open that layer in QGIS in the main window. So let's go back to the main window. I'm going to drag and drop this file right, if I can grab it. Drag and drop it right in here. And I had a choice of two pre-made grids, New England and West Coast. I'm just going to pick New England. And voila, I've got my nice lines here. Magnetic north, spaced 1 nautical mile apart. I think we're ready to export again, and this version will be a little bit nicer. Let's make another change that might be useful. I'm going to select the map, make it a little smaller, and let's, you might want to do this, you might not, but let's move our scale bar and our title, whoops, kind of clumsy here, outside of the map for clarity. Oh, you can do so many fun things. You could also rotate the map if you wanted to fit more stuff in. Good enough. Let's stop playing and export and see what we get. By the way, when you export, be sure to turn off any layers you're not using. Like, don't leave the tiled service on at the same time. Because that'll make the PDF too big or bigger than you need. Okay, let's export this again and see what we get. Patience is always required with this program. It does a lot of heavy calculation when it exports. If I was slicker, I'd have some stock music playing for you to listen to while you waited. Okay, well, let's reopen that and see what it looks like. That's the old one. Let's open it again. And that's the new one. Nicely rotated, uniform scale. Yeah, kind of slick. Nice and sharp. Yeah, that's a nice chart that's ready to use. So that pretty much covers the basic deal of making charts using QGIS and using this project template. I'm going to go a little further and show you how to use something called Compass Routes plugin to create automatically labeled routes and magnetic grid lines. And then we'll finish this video. So to do that, you need to install what's called a plugin in QGIS. QGIS doesn't come with this functionality already. You need to add it. And in order to add it, you need to open this plugins window from the plugins menu, manage and install plugins. You need to go to settings, turn on, show experimental plugins, search for the Compass Routes plugin, and then click install. I've already installed it, so we're not going to do that, but it would just be a one-click process for you if it's not already installed. Once it installs, you'll see two new icons show up in your toolbar, sort of a compass needle with an arrow and some lines. You can also go to the plugins menu and you'll see a compass routes submenu. Let's now create a compass route layer. You'll get a dialog, just click run. You don't need to put anything in it. We've now got a new layer over here called routes. And by editing this layer, we can add route information to our map. So maybe we're planning to go from place to place. I'm going to, with the routes layer selected in the routes panel, do add line feature. And now we're going to have a special tool with our mouse for adding lines. The routine here is click the start of your line, click the end of your line again. This is using a regular click, and then use a right click to finish the line. And you get a line segment labeled with distance in nautical miles and heading. Now we can add another one. Left click, you can see a red line is stretching. Left click again and right click. We have another line in our routes layer. And it's these are all keyed to the actual magnetic variation of whatever part of the map you're using. So they would be adjusted if you were, say, on the West Coast or something. All right, so now we have a new layer in our map, and that layer 2 will show up in our layout. We may need to refresh the layout to get it to show. Yep, there it is. That would be printed now if we exported this layout again to a new PDF. Now, when you put in a layer, it may not go in the best order for your map. What if you wanted to overlay this route on top of, say, not a nautical map, but an open street map or satellite map? Well, we don't see our errors anymore. That's because the layers overlay each other, and the layers at the top of the layers panel are the ones that are on the top of the view. So that's why our arrows are obscured. Fortunately, it's very easy to change the order. You just you can drag a layer up and put it anywhere in the layers list you want. And as soon as we do that, where did I put it? Oh, I put it in a folder. Silly me. There we go. So now our routes layer is visible on top of Google Maps satellite instead of being hidden by it. You can also use the other function in compass routes to make your own magnetic grids. You can just see here, create magnetic north lines. Um, if I do that, I get a dialog with a bunch of options. The only one you really need to do is the top one and say use map canvas extent. Click run, and it will draw a bunch of lines for you that fill that window. So then you get a special layer of your own for some other area, some place that I didn't give you a grid for already. So that covers compass routes. It covers making your own grid. We've already seen how to make your own chart. I hope this is a pretty useful basis for getting going with QGIS and making your own charts.